So we are going to be debating anti-natalism, and let's bring on our guest. First up, let's bring on Omni. How are you?
Hey, I'm good.
So you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum, and where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm Omni. I lean left. Yeah, but I generally tend to be pretty pro free market. I have a YouTube channel called Deity Defeater that you should all go subscribe to immediately. Yeah, and I'm taking the anti-natalist position.
Okay. Next up, let's bring on a nihilist. How are you tonight?
I am.
You
How are
cut
you?
out. Doing good. So same questions.
What were the questions again?
Come on, you know the drill.
I consider myself far left. I have a YouTube channel called Anti-Natalists, and I am very weird.
We know. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Each person can give an opening statement, can be as little as 1 minute, no longer than 5, about the topic and your stance. After that, we'll open the floor. For those of you watching, if you have questions, tag politically provoked so we know you're talking to us and not chat, and we will get to the questions during the Q&A. After the Q&A is when we'll do closing statements and final thoughts. I've been having this mosquito coming at me, you guys, so if I start like freaking out, I'm just giving you a heads up.
Clip it, boys. Clip it, boys.
Like, it's really been coming me. All right, so let's go first. Nihilist, you want to go first?
Are you sure?
I don't know. Are you?
Okay, I guess okay. I will. So anti-natalism. Oh damn, I'm clipping so bad. Anti-natalism is one of those positions which is often automatically dismissed in serious conversations because it seems intuitively wrong. After all, reproduction is natural almost by definition, and some might even declare it is the very purpose of life. But there are plenty of things that seem natural but nevertheless are wrong. Slavery, for example, was nearly ubiquitous for thousands of years until we realized it was wrong to own or control other people. Freedom of expression, freedom from want, freedom from fear. These allow individuals to determine their own actions and their own future free of coercive forces. So who the hell decided reproduction was a human right? Reproduction is all about control and coercion. We outlawed most forms of slavery 150 years ago, yet somehow any teenage idiot can simply decide to create what is essentially an incompetent indentured servant an incompetent indentured servant to control for a quarter of their entire life. Even in adulthood, we find a world full of exploitation and coercion. How can I be free from want if the need to eat, drink, and find shelter are forced upon me? How can I freely express myself if I must conform to the rules set by corporations I'm forced to work for to survive? How can I be free of fear if I am evolved to desire life despite the inevitability of death? Anybody who gives the human condition any serious thought must conclude that life has a negative value. It is better never to exist than to live and then die, no matter what mad cope the preachers or pseudo-philosophers tell you. If you, like most people, don't wish to die just yet, you don't have to. But we ought not to make a decision for people who cannot choose. Humanity in its current form should not continue to exist. Given that there is no big red button for me to push to end all life in the universe, my plan to achieve post-humanism is one of accelerationism. There is an obvious negative correlation between a society's education level and its fertility rate, to the point where most developed countries have birth rates lower than replacement rate. All anti-natalists must do to achieve their goals is to continue developing the global economy, increasing our lifespan, and increasing our education system's capabilities while holding enough power to prevent pro-natalist state policies. This would likely be most feasible in a communist society where there is no state or bourgeois able to inflate the worker population. The other solution is to undergo a genetic engineering program which changes human psychology to the point life gains positive net value. But given this isn't a eugenics discussion, I don't expect to discuss this option in too much detail.
All right, Omni.
Yeah, so my basic contention would be that I think that as a philosophical matter, a lot of anti-natalists will make the argument that the absence of suffering is not bad. The absence of well-being is not bad, but the absence of suffering the absence of well-being is not bad, but the existence of suffering is bad for future people, such that we have an obligation to make people happy, but we don't have an obligation to bring about happy people. I think that this is clearly wrong. For example, if we could press a button and it would make it so that people who will be born in the future will be considerably less happy, we would have an obligation not to press this button. Thus, the only question is whether bringing a child into existence brings about more well-being than suffering. And I think that bringing a child into existence does, in fact, bring about more well-being than suffering, at least in many cases, and so it's morally good. What a nihilist described is a position that, in discussion before the debate, that bringing any child into existence is automatically going to be morally bad. Even if you're convinced that most humans' lives are not worth living, surely there are some humans whose lives are worth living. People who, for example, have lived very comfortable qualities of life. And so I think that it's not going to be the case that every single person has a life that is not worth living. I also don't see any reason to think that most people's life is not going to be worth living. The only justification for why people's lives are allegedly not worth living is that something along the lines of that analysis of the human condition makes it obvious that that's the case. Well, a lot of people have analyzed the human condition, and generally, I think most people, myself included, think that life has more well-being than suffering. Just as you live your life intermittently during the day, think about, is this moment good? And I think most moments of most people's lives are pretty good. As Jeffrey Miller, a professor of psychology at the University of New Mexico, remarks, quote, all the research on human well-being shows almost everyone across cultures is well above neutral on happiness. And Benatar is just empirically wrong that life is dominated by suffering. But additionally, even if you're convinced that life has more suffering than well-being right now, that still would not be sufficient to prove anti-natalism, because I think we have reason to suspect that the world will get significantly better by the time your children will be grown up. So there are several trends that were discussed in an article by Browner that indicate that I think that the world is going to get better and that the quality of life will improve. First is Browner constructed a model that looked at far future scenarios and concluded that they will be good in expectation by modeling the expected value versus disvalue. Second, with increasing technology, future agents will have far greater ability to implement their will. Third, our descendants will have much more information. And so if anti-natalism is correct, and if it's better never to have been, then they'll be able to figure that out, and they'll be able to improve quality of life. 4, future technology could allow us to experience nearly infinite well-being. There's no reason why our lives can't be significantly better with new technology. 5, philosophy will advance, allowing us to come to better moral conclusions. And 6, I think that if you look throughout history, the moral circle has been steadily expanding, such that more and more sentient beings are part of our moral circle. And so ideally, at some point, we'll include all sentient beings in our moral circle. Additionally, the amount of well-being that could be experienced in these sort of future scenarios are very high. Bostrom argues that there's above a 1% chance of it occurring in our lifetimes, and that as Bostrom says, quote, he says, quote, a long shot it may be, but for an expected utility maximizer, the benefit of living for perhaps billions of subjective years with greatly expanded capacities under fantastically favorable conditions could more than make up for the remote prospects of success. And if there's greater than 1% chance of that, then it seems like that's clearly going to be the case. Additionally, the world is clearly getting better, as Steven Pinker has argued in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, which analyzed aggregate trends and concluded that things like poverty were declining, rates of disease were declining, and overall indicators of quality of life are increasing. So the TLDR version is, I think most people's lives are worth living, and they're only getting better, and I think they could get much better with new technology.
Alrighty. Floor's open.
Okay. So I see you reference a lot the fact that the world will get better in the future, and I don't know that that actually defeats my argument, because my position has never been that that anti-natalism would apply in the future. It's certainly possible, and I addressed this in my opening statement, that we will eventually reach a post-human society where you can have life with
Yep.
positive value overall. So
Yeah,
I think if we reach that point, and we should be working to reach that point, which is why I support a liberal form of eugenics, then then at that point I would become pro-natalist or something similar to that.
Yeah, well, but what Bostrom argues that there's above a 1% chance of that occurring in our lifetimes, and that means that certainly above 1% chance of it occurring in the lifetimes of our children.
Well, how did he get the 1% number?
Well, so he analyzed the predictions from a lot of futurists. It's obviously going to be hard to have super precise data on this, but he analyzed predictions from sort of smart people who've been looking in the field, and this was from the source that I sent you before the debate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think looking at a bunch of predictions from futurists is necessarily a good way about determining the likelihood that we will reach a post-human society by our lifetimes. I don't think it's possible. I mean, you might. It's like looking to the future. Like your argument includes like looking to your descendants having more information and better technology. Well, you could say that about anything at any point in time. Basically, that's no excuse not to do what we can do now based on the information that we do have now. And what we have now is that having more children is objectively a bad thing.
What information do we have now that you think supports that it brings about more suffering than well-being? Because the data that I have said indicates that the consensus among researchers in the field is that most lives have more well-being than suffering. And we have aggregate trends that indicate that the world is only improving. And we have predictions from futurists that indicate that there's the possibility of, tech that would allow us to experience billions of years, billions of subjective life years of very, very good existence. So given that, what trends do you think count in favor of the view that life has more suffering than well-being right now?
Well, I don't particularly put much weight into researchers saying that life has positive value because it really depends on the standard by which we measure. For example, most people have positive life satisfaction. That is true, but that doesn't mean that life has positive value. It just means that our perception of life as the perception of the lives that we have led so far is positive.
Yeah.
That does not mean that they have actually been positive. While we experience life, we will have extremely negative values.
Stop for a sec. I asked you a question, and then you went on a ramble, but did not answer my question. My question is specific. My question is, so you've given a lot of reasons as to why the metrics that I'm using are not good. How should we go about determining if most lives are worth living? And what evidence do you think supports the view that life is not worth living?
Well, I mean, you can never objectively determine this, but it's mostly philosophical. I mean, like, for example, or you can look at psychological phenomenon, including like the hedonic treadmill, which is the tendency for positive situations not to last, or the permanence of negativity, the negativity bias, which is the tendency for negative things to outweigh positive things of equal intensity in people's minds, and the positivity offset, which is the tendency for people to evaluate neutral things or life satisfaction as positive despite being actually neutral. So there are a lot of psychological factors which lead me to the conclusion that there's no way that any person over the course of their entire lifetime will experience more fulfillment or pleasure than suffering.
Okay, analyzing psychological phenomenon that would make it so that our lives would go worse than one might predict absent psychological phenomenon is obviously not going to be sufficient to prove the claim that most lives are not worth living. Like, similarly, some people, like a lot of people, get into car accidents, but that obviously, fact by itself, is not sufficient to prove that most lives are not worth living, right?
Well, yeah, but you can take a look at people who have disabilities, and a few years later, they're usually about as happy as they were before the crash. Now, we know objectively that the quality of their life has decreased, yet they seem to have the same amount. Yet they seem to have the same amounts of life satisfaction as before the crash. It's clear that just asking somebody if their life is satisfactory isn't a good enough job.
But I'm not going based on just asking people if their life is satisfactory. But I mean, so wait, why? I mean, you were the one who raised the thesis about the hedonic treadmill, which I think is true. That people generally, their quality of life, sort of, if their life is really crappy for a long time, then they just sort of revert to equilibrium, and then the average moment of life that they previously considered crappy now brings them joy, such that they appreciate the little things more. And I think that's the reason why, after a few years, people with disabilities sort of revert back to a similar amount of well-being. So why do you think their life
not
is...
necessarily. Because,
Well, that's what the hedonic treadmill says, which you brought up.
Well, yeah, that is one part of it, but there's the other part of it where you could be disabled and you could have like some sort of positive life satisfaction, but you could also objectively feel pain and pain where you got surgery or wherever. You could objectively feel more pain and more suffering and still have the same amount of life satisfaction. On the other hand, and here's the asymmetry, it's not possible for chronic positivity to last. It's not like chronic pain, which can last forever. You can only be truly fulfilled for a few moments of your life, and after that, your hedonic treadmill adapts remarkably fast to that.
No, I don't think that's true. I think that the majority of moments of existence of the majority of people are generally pretty good.
Well, that's colored on by your perception, but that doesn't mean that's actually true.
At random points of the day, I think, am I enjoying this moment? And I think that based on other data that has done that, it's concluded that most people enjoy most moments of most days.
How are you measuring that? That is not colored by bias.
Well, okay, so I'm really sad in the moment, but I think I'm happy.
Yeah, that can happen a lot. Like when you're out exercising, you're actually feeling a lot of pain in the moment. But after it's over, and after you see your abs or whatever, you will feel satisfaction. You will feel satisfaction.
We're not talking about after it's over. We're talking about in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment when you're exercising, you are objectively not. I mean, you may be feeling some pleasure at the same time, but you are objectively feeling pain. But we are pretty good at ignoring it, despite the fact that it's there. But that doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay, wait.
The reason we exercise is not because there is no pain or that the exercise is necessarily good in itself, but it's because we are satisfied in some way by the end result. But the end result, being what we evaluate, tells us nothing about the process and how much satisfaction we gain out of the process itself. It's the process, which is life. Life is a process. It's the process that I care about.
People also get well-being when they are exercising.
In what way? I don't think
endorphins are released when you exercise.
Well, true. I don't think that is outweighed by the amount of pain you feel if you're running for a million miles at a time.
People when they think about whether or not they want to make the choice to exercise, they decide that exercising is a thing that is worthwhile, and they enjoy it, and they look forward to it.
Based on an evaluation which occurs after they exercise. Not during the moment.
Well, also
during the moment, most people feel pain and they're like, I don't want to keep going, but I must. And only afterward do they decide that it was a good idea all along.
Nihilist, how do you know this? How do you know that most people, when they're exercising, think I would rather not be exercising?
I mean, okay, I can't bring up a study to prove that most people don't like exercising, like the act in itself. I mean, I guess I'll go off intuition then at that point.
I think most people's intuition will be that the people who find exercising to be a sufficiently worthwhile activity to do enjoy exercising. Now, there is some pain to it, but they find that the benefits outweigh.
Well, that depends on what you mean by exercise. When I'm talking about exercise, I'm talking about the movements itself, not our interpretation of the whole later on. So you may find joy out of running some distance, but you don't actually find joy in moving your legs a lot of the time.
Well, okay.
It is the process and the amount of pleasure or suffering during that process that I care about, not about the evaluation that occurs at the end.
Yeah, so you keep bringing up this point about the evaluation after. It's a red herring. I've never said anything about the evaluation after. I'm talking about moment-to-moment comparisons of people sort of judging their utility in the moment, okay? So that point does not matter. The other point that you're making, which is that they're not enjoying... I think that I think generally people are going to be a better judge of whether they're enjoying an experience than you are from on high, making grand proclamations about how the people who exercise don't really enjoy exercise. I mean, what about like eating food? Most people enjoy eating food. Most people enjoy chatting with friends.
And yet eating food comes out of desire, a desire to stay alive, a desire to quench your thirst or be less hungry. It comes out of the feelings of pain that you feel all the rest of the time when you're hungry, and it's only fulfilled when you actually release all of that pain from yourself by eating. But the only thing that drives you, the only thing that drives you to do things that make you feel good is the pain that precedes it. Without pain in like motivating us, there's no reason for us to actually eat.
Okay, a couple of things. One, even if true, that would not matter, right? If the warning signal that we are hungry causes some amount of pain, but then when we eat, we get pleasure from it, then that would still be an improvement in our quality of life. Most
not
people,
necessarily. I'd say it probably brings us to about even.
What?
I mean, I think during the time that you are eating, yeah, you'll probably experience some like hormones that make you feel objectively good. Yeah, I agree. Yes, in certain moments in life you can actually, but throughout most of your life, you have so many desires going on, not just the desire to eat, not just the desire to find shelter, but your desire to be financially successful. That is a constant desire that almost everybody feels and almost nobody achieves. And once you reach that, once you become the ultra billionaire that you are, you just want something else. You'll go and fly out in your penis-shaped rocket to try to find whatever's next. You're always constantly motivated by desire, and has nothing to do with rationality. You just must be motivated by desire.
Yeah,
and through your desire, you are constantly suffering, and there is no way to escape it.
Yeah, so I agree that we are motivated by desires. That does not prove the point that we experience more suffering than well-being. What you're doing on every issue is you're just like asserting that when we take an act that we're experiencing more suffering than well-being, when we exercise, when we eat food, which you have no basis for. I mean, I wonder, like, you know, like, is your pantry just stocked with like crappy food? Because I think like
I eat a lot. I drink a lot of Soylent, so if that might answer your question.
Like, I don't know. Naz, are you like under a bridge or something? Why do you sound like shit?
I don't know. I mean, I am in a really reflective room right now.
Okay.
Sorry. If you want me to like get closer to the mic, is this better?
Worse? I don't know. Talk a little bit.
Hello. I'm a nihilist, and I think I'm really smart, and everybody else thinks I'm really dumb.
I mean, you still sound like shit, but it's not as shitty.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody is really equipped to make an exact calculation of whether or of how much pain or pleasure anybody is feeling at any sort of time. We can only make guesses. But the fact that we're always motivated by desire, but we don't really truly feel fulfilled for many moments of our lives, it leads me to the conclusion that life has overall a negative value. I stub my toe and I feel like shit. Okay, and I don't feel that equal level of happiness all that often. Like maybe if I beat a really hard video game once, maybe after hours. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it happens nearly as often.
Okay, so I mean, you're appealing to psychological facts about yourself, about how when you experience the things that bring you joy bring you less joy than the things that bring you suffering. But
yeah, I think we have an infinite potential for suffering, while we do not have an infinite potential for
we obviously do not have an infinite potential for suffering.
So do you think that if I
have a large potential for suffering,
if I torture you today and if I torture you tomorrow, do you think eventually things will stop hurting if I keep torturing you forever?
I have no idea.
Because I can guarantee you that you cannot feel fulfilled forever. That is psychologically impossible. You're your dopamine will just stop working. Your receptors will just stop taking it.
What keeps happening is what keeps happening is you appeal, despite the like consensus among empirical researchers and data that's relied on moment-to-moment evaluations of
the
existence.
data is colored by bias. The data doesn't tell you.
Your data is colored by bias.
No.
Your data is just reflecting on your own like experiences and then forming sweeping conclusions about every single human's life.
Do you not agree that suffering can be much longer lasting than fulfillment?
Then fulfillment. I'm not sure. I think that the things that cause you to suffer are generally fewer, and they may be longer lasting. Generally, right? You can have chronic pain.
You can have chronic pain for the rest of your life, or you can stub your toe every few minutes. That will cause you a huge amount of pain. And how many times do you actually feel enough happiness to make up for that?
Stubbing your toe is like not that painful of an experience, particularly in relation to the greater things in life. I mean, the things like falling in love, having friendship.
Even falling in love.
Reading.
How much pain do you think is involved with that? You're a guy, you know how much pain there is involved.
Yeah, there's some amount of sadness.
Desiring someone that you want being rejected or being anxious to see whether or not you will be rejected. And then after that, eventually you might lose the person. You eventually will lose the person. There's so much suffering involved. And I'm not saying that the process of love itself is necessarily negative.
Stop the ramble, please.
A lot of ways.
Stop saying words.
Let me just finish this point. I don't see a single way that we can feel fulfilled without suffering first. I cannot name a single way, but we can suffer without being fulfilled first.
Okay. What if? Okay. I mean, there's like a lot of ways that we can feel like experience well-being without suffering. I mean, if a person plays a video game, that doesn't require suffering. If a person eats chocolate cake,
well, it requires boredom first, right? You must
it doesn't require boredom.
Open the video game and start playing it.
No, you don't. Wait, what? You don't have to be bored. I mean, I don't really play video games, but I think that I play IO games, but you don't have to be bored in order to want to start playing.
You cannot take any positive action without desiring that action, and you cannot desire something unless you are suffering in some way. You cannot feel positivity without first feeling negativity.
Wait, that's
feel
negativity
without feeling positivity.
That's obviously false. Okay, let's give a counter example. So let's say I'm eating chocolate cake. Okay, presumably I'm not feeling suffering, right? Just in the moment.
Process of eating chocolate cake, you could be or you couldn't be.
Okay, but just me, right? Not me. I don't have a chronic illness. I'm just eating chocolate cake. Okay.
Yeah, but what caused you to get chocolate cake?
Well, okay.
Was it because you were hungry, or were you bored, or were you? What made?
No, I had a desire to eat chocolate cake because it tastes good.
Yeah, and why would you desire it? And
because I like things that taste good.
And up until you get that chocolate cake, you are still in the state of desiring. You are missing the chocolate cake until you get it.
No.
While you are missing that chocolate cake, you are suffering to a small amount, admittedly, but you are suffering.
So, wait. So this is kind of a red herring, right? But it's because I wasn't done giving the example, right? So the example was, say you're eating a chocolate cake. And while you're eating the chocolate cake, you think, this chocolate cake would be nice if it also had sprinkles. And so you put on sprinkles. Presumably you're not suffering, but you still have a desire, correct?
I think if you analyzed it closely enough, then yeah, you would be suffering because you found something missing with the chocolate cake that you then had the desire to solve.
Wait, but not
if you didn't have sprinkles to put on your chocolate cake, you'd probably be a little bit disappointed, wouldn't you?
No.
You cannot defeat this. You cannot find a single example of positivity without negativity coming first.
Wait, I just did. You're just no.
Would you not be disappointed if you went to your pantry and didn't find sprinkling? You would feel disappointed.
Well, if I didn't find sprinkles, I'd be very slightly disappointed. I mean, it would be like the world's smallest violin, but
it wouldn't compare to the amount of joy you receive while you eat the chocolate cake.
But if I did find sprinkles, then I would not be disappointed And that proves that happiness does not have to come with suffering. The
Well,
thought,
no, because
the
you
thought,
actually
the
had to
thought,
go
the
and
thought,
get up and
the
get
thought,
the sprinkles.
the thought that you're not experiencing something that you would like to be experiencing does not automatically cause suffering. For like, you can think fondly about how it's cool that you will experience it at some point. You can reminisce on the good old days when you were experiencing it.
And even that has an element of, I wish I could go back to those days because I'm not experiencing that right now.
No, I don't think it does. I think
it sucks that I'm not experiencing the happy memories now rather than reliving them in the past.
Annihilist,
yeah, that is suffering.
Just, like, you know, I mean, you're just okay. So generally, I think the way that we should come to these conclusions. Well, you know, I'm a big data simp, so I like to look at the data and the consensus among researchers. But you don't want to look at that, and you don't want to look at want to look at the consensus among researchers. You don't want to look at people's evaluation of their experiences. You just want to evaluate it based on your opinion, which like seems based on the comments of the chat not to be shared very widely.
Well,
that like
shared widely. I'm an anti-natalist. I don't value life. Most people value life. This is evolution, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Well, no. So you're appealing to, you know, psychological facts about yourself, but you, on the basis of your experience, you think that life is not worth living, right? But I think on the basis of the experience of most people, I think most people think that on net life is worth living, and most people enjoy most moments of their conscious life. I think that the way that we should decide these things is often through revealed preferences. So you see, okay, if we want to see if someone enjoys exercising, we see, okay, people tend to do things that they want to do. So if a person wants to exercise a lot, presumably they enjoy exercising. It's possible that they like have like an eating disorder or something, and like they just really want to exercise because they're like afraid that they're fat or something. But like in most cases, if people, you know, do something a lot, they presumably desire it. And so similarly, if like it seems like most people like hold a positive outlook throughout most moments of their conscious existence. And so I think most moments of their conscious existence are good. And even when people have experiences that are bad, so for example, even when even when like people who have chronic pain, they still find most moments of their existence to be worth living.
Yeah, and that is not proof that you are correct or that like you can put a number on
what data. What data would be sufficient to convince you?
Tell you that because it's just colored by bias. Yeah,
but you're also colored by bias.
We are evolved to evaluate our life as positive, or else we'd all die, and natural selection would take care of that. We, by our nature as human beings, must overwhelmingly like life, but that doesn't mean life is good. Do you understand that basic fact?
I understand the fact that most people think life is worth living does not automatically make it worth living, but based on the results of studies, based on long-term aggregate trends, based on the consensus of researchers in the field, and based on the opinions of people in the field, versus the like just assertions based on facts about their own psychological state of one like person on Politically Provoked called a nihilist. I think that I would generally trust the consensus from the empirical, like the consensus from the empirical sciences, particularly because all these judgments that you're sharing are not ones that are shared by me. Like I find most moments of existence to be worth experiencing.
The empirical science is based on people's self-evaluation, and most people's self-evaluations are wrong. That's why I can't look at that. You can't like have a scientist tell you that. You have to look at the potential for. I can't tell you how good or how bad a certain experience is, or how it adds up. But I can tell you general facts. For example, that you can endlessly suffer the way you cannot endlessly be happy. I can tell you that for sure. And you might argue that yes, you could endlessly suffer, but the limited amounts of happiness we feel actually makes up for that, because the potential isn't actually realized. The infinite potential of suffering isn't realized. That's the argument that you could make, and that could be somewhat valid. But I don't think you can use some scientist asking and surveying people on how happy they are,
but
how much they like what they do.
Yeah, so
to arrive at a good conclusion.
Yeah, so a nihilist. So do you remember what my response to that was?
Yeah, your response was basically just look at the data.
No. Okay, I'll repeat my response. My response was that pointing to something that makes our lives worse than they could otherwise be, it does not prove that most moments of our existence are bad. For example, pointing to the existence of sprained wrists and saying there are sprained wrists, but there aren't like super mega unsprained wrists, does not prove that like our lives are not worth living. Yes, obviously chronic pain is something that makes our life less worth living than it would otherwise be. But like the average experience, I think, is pretty good. I mean, people enjoy eating, people enjoy hanging out with family, hanging out with friends, falling in love, having sex. I mean, there are like so many things that people get, reading books, being at church.
What do you think people are doing most of the time? Most people are at work like a lot of the time, or sleeping. I'll say that sleeping has like a neutral value, maybe slightly negative once you wake up, maybe slightly positive once you wake up and feel refreshed, maybe very negative before you actually get to fall asleep. But that this act of sleeping is
I don't
neutral.
think that
I think most of the time you're at work or you're basically doing nothing. I'd say that 70% of most people's lives is just doing nothing.
Well, okay,
throughout that time of doing nothing, you are actually suffering.
Being at work is not the same thing as being at work is not the same thing as doing nothing, and I don't see a reason to think that people's quality of life is negative while they're at work.
Yeah, but do you see how the work can be used as an analogy? For example, most people will not stop going to work. They find the overall going to work has a positive effect on their life. Yet throughout the process of going to work, none of that actually gives them any happiness. Yet they continue to do it anyway. It is completely possible for somebody to have a positive evaluation of an act, yet suffer throughout the entire act while they are doing it. Same with running or exercising. Same with practicing a musical instrument.
I agree. Like, look, what you're doing is you're saying we don't have perfect information on this, and people's beliefs about this might not be reliable. And yeah, that's true. It's possible that we get this wrong. But I mean, that doesn't mean that like you're also relying on the basis of your intuitive beliefs. And I mean, I'm obviously not qualified to like diagnose you with anything over the internet, but you really seem to not be enjoying your life very much.
Oh, I love my life. I have positive life satisfaction, but I also recognize that my positive satisfaction is incorrect.
Well, okay. I mean, I think that I don't think it's possible to delude people about their mental states, right? Like, I think that it can't be the case that you're actually sad, but you think you're happy.
No, that I never. I don't think I. It's not that simple.
I didn't say that you said that. I was just making that claim. Yeah. So, wait. Also, I see Tyler in the chat. Tyler should debate me on utilitarianism. He's dodging, but okay. Anyways, wait. Sorry. What was the last point that was raised? Or veganism? Wait. Sorry.
You're a vegan. You know how many animals you kill every year just by existing? Like, even if you're completely vegan, you'll probably kill like tens of thousands of animals every year. So by creating new children, you're probably killing tens of thousands of more animals every year. That's not very vegan of you.
I don't think that it's tens of thousands every year. I also think that most lives in nature are not worth living. So I think it would be better if there were fewer animals that existed in nature.
guess we agree on that then. Do you
Well,
want
wait, but then that's a reason to be pro-natalism, because you want to because humans will reduce the number of animals in nature, and you think animals have lives not worth living.
Well, not necessarily, because my goal is to end all life on Earth eventually. And you can't do that without humans.
Wait, you want to what?
Eventually end all life on Earth, but you cannot do that without humans. You need humans to kill everybody.
You want to end all life on Earth?
Yes. I mean,
well,
that would follow, right? Because I want humans to go extinct, or at least become
Wait, but then what about
post-human.
all the aggregate trends I pointed to that indicated that the quality of life of people worldwide is improving? We have the possibility for like billions of years of existence, etc.
But that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily follow that humans, based on our psychology, are going to optimize that and actually translate that to a better life.
Wait, sorry, I didn't.
Like the hedonic treadmill will still exist. You could increase the quality of life for people. You could increase the quality of life for people, but then they just start taking it for granted.
Why? I mean, the hedonic treadmill is a contingent fact about our evolution. It's not a logical principle. Like,
yeah,
why?
but people start taking their life for granted if you make them better. I mean, they'll suffer less, sure. I mean, they won't like be constantly starving and stuff. But like, yeah, they'll eventually start taking everything for granted.
Wait, like with future tech, we could make it so that it's not the case that people's quality of life just reverts back to the hedonic treadmill.
Oh yeah, I agree. We should be trying to engineer human psychology.
But you said you wanted the world to end.
Oh yeah, well, based on what we have now, yeah, it would be better to push the big red button and end human life. But if I could be guaranteed, or if I thought we had a good chance of eventually reaching a post-humanist society where we had people who didn't actually have a negative quality of life, then yeah, I would be okay with surviving.
Okay, like currently, would you support killing all people?
Yeah.
Okay, but what about the aggregate trends that indicate that I think that we have a reasonable chance of achieving a transhumanist utopia at some point in the far future?
What do you mean by that? Well, do you think we have a reasonable chance of getting to the point where our psychology will be fundamentally changed and that we'll actually be able to have more?
Yeah.
I mean, you already believe that we have more satisfaction than suffering. I just don't see it. I think people are very resistant to having their minds literally reconfigured.
Well,
I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, I'm pro eugenics. I would be okay with
we're not talking about eugenics. I'm talking about people voluntarily just like doing things that would cause them to increase well-being.
Eugenics is no less voluntary than any other system.
Okay,
than regular natalism. Okay, believe it or not, nobody decides to actually get born. Life is always involuntary.
Yeah, but
eugenics is no less voluntary.
That's true, but the fact that you don't in fact consent to something doesn't mean that it's immoral. For example, if I start talking to you on the sidewalk, you didn't consent to it beforehand. That doesn't mean that you're made worse off by me starting talking to you on the sidewalk.
Technically, yes, I am, but it's like such a small infraction that like it's not worth policing.
Wait, what if I say really interesting things to you and I make you really happy with all my interesting insights?
Again, I'm a rule utilitarian. Yeah, it's possible that you could say something that would make it worth my time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I've presented my case for why most lives are worth living.
Should we get to the Q&A?
A nihilist has appealed to facts about his psychological state.
No, it's not just facts about my psychological state. Unless you can disprove the hedonic treadmill and the fact that we'll take things for granted, as long as if you don't disprove the negativity bias, which is the tendency for negative things to outweigh positive things in your mind of equal intensity. Unless you can disprove those sorts of things, or disprove that like you can suffer endlessly but not feel pleasure endlessly.
So the third point I responded to already. The fact that you can't like feel pleasure endlessly does not mean that lives are not worth living. I mean, like we can imagine.
Well, yeah, it doesn't necessarily follow, but I think it's a good indicator. It's the only indicator that actually means something. We have
No,
infinite potential for suffering. We don't have infinite potential for pleasure. That doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have more pleasure than suffering, but it's a clue to where we are at. I can't like put a number on the amount of suffering or pleasure people experience. I don't think that's possible, and I don't think asking people in a clinical setting how they feel about their lives is actually reliable in any sense of the word. But that's all we can go off of. And based on everything that I see about our human psychology, it currently seems to be that we have negative value.
You're appealing to like two facts about our psychology. One of them is the optimism bias, but that would only indict if we were looking at people's assessments of their life satisfaction, which I agree is not reliable. The next point you bring up is that can't experience chronic pleasure. It's obviously not decisive, and I think that the goodness of things like friendship, falling in love, reading books, hobbies, I mean, just, you know, eating good food, having sex, just all the things that bring people pleasure in life. I think like the goodness of those things are going to outweigh.
And I think experiencing all those good things and then going for months without it after that, or like, for example, sex. Like if you have sex with a person and then you break up, like you might go for months or years missing that sex. And then it's like all of that time, because you actually learn how great sex was, you're probably suffering throughout all that time because you're deprived of sex. When you experience a positive experience, not only is it preceded by negative experiences, it's probably actually probably after that experience ends, you start to desire and you start to actually feel negative emotions in the back of your mind throughout all of your life. And I think that, yeah, sure, like reading a book, I guess I think I'm bored most of the time when I'm reading a book until the good parts, which are like 10% of a book. But yeah, I think
read more interesting books then.
No, I think generally, even in processes, even in actions that you think you like, throughout that process, there is still a lot of negative and a lot of negative stuff that you experience that make the positivity of the overall experience much less positive than you think it is. And also, before and after the experience, you will also feel negative emotions, which is why I think overall
most people reflect on most moments of their existence. Like when you ask people intermittently if they're enjoying that moment of their existence, most people say yes to most moments. So
but do you think they're actually objectively looking at what's actually currently happening? Do you think they're actually saying, oh yeah, I am moving my arms in this direction and that makes me happy? Or are they actually just thinking about the end result that will be achieved at the current, based on the current moment?
Well, I don't think it's so mechanical, right? Like when I move my arms, I don't think, wow, if I move my arms, it'll make me happy, right? But I think that people consider their contentment and think, yeah, this moment's going pretty well. And regardless of why they think it's going pretty well, regardless of whether it's reflecting on a past moment of enjoyment or like thinking about a future moment of enjoyment that will come when they finish the task, or just enjoying the experience itself, or laughing. I mean, you know, with any of these things, I don't see any reason to think that the lives are not worth living. So I mean, you like responded to three things that I allegedly haven't refuted. You brought up the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is obviously not going to be decisive. It could be the case that there was a hedonic treadmill, and also that most lives were worth living if the point of sort of the hedonic middle state is positive, which I think the hedonic middle state is positive. And then the last point you brought up, I already responded to that.
Yeah, and I also, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I think even asking even in a clinical setting, like even asking someone to evaluate the positivity or negativity of any experience automatically colors and gives people bias. I mean, just by asking how are you doing right now, you are prompting people to think about like the overall picture. And when people think about the overall picture, that actually activates the positivity offset. So just by asking that question, you are automatically biasing the result. There's just no way for a scientist to actually like try to quantify the
Yeah,
amount
so
of
it's
happiness and
obviously not going to
objective
be
about it.
perfect. My point is that I would just trust
not
that
even close. It's
more than
worthless.
your like misanthropic like reflections on your moments of experience that you're generalizing to the population.
Well,
I would have one other related question because I think we've sort of hit these points quite a bit. Are you opposed to murder?
Generally, yes. I don't think murder is a good way of solving anything. Yeah, especially like if you see things like certain types of disasters, like what is it, like after the Oklahoma bombing, like people tend to like have more children as a result of that sometimes, based on certain criteria. It seems like it's not a good long-term solution to murder people.
Oh well, what if we like what if there was just a guy who's alone in the woods and we can murder him and no one will find out about it?
That's a good question. I still don't think I'd pull the trigger because
wait, but
I don't know what's going on.
But his life's not worth living, and so just kill people if you can would be an optimistic rule, right? If you can, and it won't have any other spillover effect.
That's a good question. It could be the case. I'm not like going to be like weaselly about it, so like it could be the case, yeah.
Well, not it could be the case. On your view, it is the case. You would be okay with
okay. So I think I would definitely push the big red button to kill everything in existence. So I guess I have to.
Okay, so you would be okay with murdering random people in the woods if you could get away with it.
If a person falls in the woods and nobody hears it, yeah, I guess maybe.
Okay, and what do you think about like cures to cancer? Good thing or bad thing?
Cures to cancer?
Prolong existence.
I think generally increasing people's quality of life generally tends to decrease the rate at which they reproduce. So, so generally having a hostile environment to life is actually counterproductive. Again, I think I'm an accelerationist. I want to make people's quality of life so good that they stop thinking about having children.
Okay, so let's say that you could press a button and just all the people from one continent would go away. Just like a random continent. Would you support that? It wouldn't end all life on Earth, but it would just end all life on one continent.
Well, it depends on if the news gets out. If the continent like despawns or something and people don't even realize it, then yeah, I guess you could argue.
No, I mean no, but like no one, like people know about it, but then no one goes to the continent because they think it's cursed. So I think you'll press the button again.
I mean, in practical terms, you would accomplish this by, for example, like nuking the country, throwing everybody on there, right? But yeah. I think nuking the country usually would provoke a decently negative response to the anti-natalists currently in power, and the anti-natalists in power would probably get overthrown and killed. So I think overall, if my goal, wait, can I finish? So if my goal is overall is to kill everything in existence, I don't think doing an unclean job of it would actually help us reach that goal. It would just push back the anti-natalist movement another few thousand years, and we'd have to rebuild from scratch. But yeah, I mean, overall,
there isn't much of an anti-natalist movement. It's like not that many people, and so I don't think it's going to be successful at doing much. But
I agree. Like, there's no way anti-natalism is actually going to happen. Again, which is why
so then you can't appeal to it being bad because it would make anti-natalism unpopular because you said it's not going to happen.
Well, if hypothetically an anti-natalist got into a position,
we're not talking about if they. We're not talking about if they got into a position of power. We're just talking about imagine if like the person in charge. Well, it's the president who's in charge of the nuclear weapons. Imagine if Biden was like. If you like hypnotized Biden and you could hypnotize Biden into launching all the nukes and blowing up a continent, would you do that?
It depends on a lot of.
And the continent would not repopulate because it would have so much like radioactivity that it couldn't repopulate.
It depends on like the context and like the blowback after that. It really depends.
Okay, so you might be okay with dropping nuclear bombs and having everybody's faces be melted off on a continent.
You're making like a phenomenon about it, but like, I mean, if we're going to be objective about it, I said that I would push the big red button to end all of existence. So you like
Yeah, but
dressing it up as like a nuke that will
yeah,
like
yeah.
radiation and kill everybody like that. I think that's just like an emotional argument rather than like
Well, I mean,
the actual fact that
how,
I would kill a lot of people if I could do it without extremely.
Yeah, okay. Note to national security: don't give a nihilist the nuclear codes anytime soon. Okay, I mean, I think that's sort of all that I have to say. Are there any other points that you want to make, a nihilist? I mean, I just take that to be a reductio on your view that you would be in favor of ending all life, be in favor of murdering random forest dwellers, and you would be agnostic on whether we should nuke continents.
Yeah, I don't think in reality like that would be good, because I mean, if we had a policy where randomly killing forest dwellers was okay, I don't think that would build a very good world. And I certainly don't think it would build a world conducive to the ideas of anti-natalism. So it's not like this is something that would happen. But what do you think about just the general idea of improving education to the point that our birth rates are below replacement rates? I mean, basically, that's all I really want to do. I want to just improve the quality of sex education until people stop having as many kids, and then prevent a pro-natalist policy that comes in the future.
I mean,
I was muted. Okay.
I mean, I'd be okay with I'd be okay with sex ed. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move to the Q&A. Okay. All right.
Yep.
So this is from Ryan B with $5 super chat. Thank you. Nihilist is probably doing us a favor with the barely audible mic. Who hurt this guy?
Nobody hurt me. As I said, I like my life. I just.
Oh my god, you've never sounded this shitty before. Wait till you hear it back. It's terrible. It's really bad.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Cute Root with $2 super chat. Thanks, Cute Root. A nihilist is right. He should not breed.
Oh, I'm going to breed for sure. I think I can. I think if I have a child who goes on to convince 2 other people not to have children, yeah, that's a life worth living.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to kill myself now because I can convince people.
Oh my god, stop saying things like that. All right. From Storm with the super chat. I don't like either of you, but I dislike Omni more, so go a nihilist. Also, use this $5 to get yourself something sweet ready. Thank you. And then from Fanal for a nihilist. Do you have a hard time distinguishing between virtues and vices?
I mean, if you're a deontologist, I don't think I've addressed any of that yet. I don't know. Seems subjective.
Okay. Let's see here. From Papaya Thief. I gotta make this bigger. Sorry, it's really small. It's hard to read this. Hold on. Okay, so from Papaya Thief, question for a nihilist. Do you think it's a good thing to convince people to commit suicide?
To convince people to commit suicide? Sure. I mean, they're doing it themselves, right? I'm not killing anyone. They're killing themselves. So yeah.
But I mean, like, are you trying to convince people to do that? Is that what's happening? I wasn't paying attention.
I mean, I wouldn't do that because anybody who would commit suicide is somebody I can use to convince other people to not reproduce, which I think is more important.
Okay.
But yeah, technically it would be a lesser good.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I take that to be a...
None of what I say is intuitive, obviously. I'm going to lose the poll like super easily. That's okay.
Okay. There goes Todd. From the John. Would a nihilist support propagation of life if the majority of living things enjoyed their lives and contributed positively to their lives?
It depends on what you mean by enjoy. If like enjoy as in like the net, your life is a net positive, then yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. From Cody B. To a nihilist, Norm Macdonald died today. Does that make you happy?
Who is Norm Macdonald?
I guess some comedian, I believe. Okay, so he doesn't care. From Brian Cope, bro, this dude doesn't know what liability is. Okay.
What? Are you talking to me? Like I'd be liable for the murder of the man in the woods? I mean, I never said murder was right. like what I was getting at is that if the dude died, a dude alone in the woods died, that would be good.
Well, you also said you'd be like in favor of killing him if no one would find out.
I think if they died, it would be a good thing. I don't
you also think it would
I don't
be
think having,
good if
I don't think having
them.
a society in which killing somebody like that is allowed would be a good society. But technically, yeah, if a person alone in the wood dies, I guess.
So if a tree falls in the middle of the woods and it crushes a random guy in the woods, you think that's a good thing?
Could be.
Okay.
So from hobby to annihilist. Given that the only way to develop technology to eliminate all life would be to keep breeding humans until they develop it, do you support pragmatic natalism until then?
I think everything I've done is pretty pragmatic. I mean, it's possible that if we like genetically engineered ourselves to change our psychology, that we might not actually need to go extinct. If life might become worth living.
From Avi, question: how would you feel about Brittany being your new mother? He wants me to adopt you. So weird. I told him I'd put you in a basket in front of a fire station, but he still wants me to adopt you. All right. So from Jazz, have him talk about David Benatar and Better to Have Been Never Been. I don't know what he's talking about.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. Benatar is spelled wrong, but yeah. So I think Better Never to Have Been is wrong. Benatar in Better Never to Have Been is wrong. I think that that most lives tend to be worth living. And Benatar makes this argument that that bringing about future suffering is bad, but bringing about future well-being is not good. And I just think that's obviously wrong, right? I think that if we were having a kid, well, like if a person was having a kid and they could just press a button that would make it so that the kid was never happy, I think that action would be seriously morally wrong.
Well, yeah, but do you think that if you knew that your kid would have a happy life and would have positive net value, do you think you'd be obligated to have kids?
I think it would be a good thing to do. I don't know if I would say that.
Should you be obligated to do it?
Well, I don't know what you mean by obligation.
Because I believe that if somebody is going to be born with like cystic fibrosis, you have an obligation not to have the kid. So there's an asymmetry here, right? There's an obligation to prevent bad, while there's not an obligation to propagate good.
But you're a utilitarian, right?
Yeah, I think it would be better if you could guarantee that your child would have a better life, have an objectively good life, then it would be good to have the child, but it wouldn't be obligatory. So, there's an asymmetry here because so even if there's a 99% chance that your child will have a positive life and a 1% chance that the child has a negative life, the 1% that it will have a negative life might actually outweigh the 99% because you have an obligation to avoid bad, while you don't have an obligation to propagate good.
So let's say that we have two options. Okay. Option one is that we make infinite So option one is that we make option one is that we just bring no one into existence. Option two is that we bring 10 quadrillion people into existence who experience no suffering in their life. And just the greatest forms of well-being imaginable, like far greater than we can conceive of now. But then we have one person who stubs their toe and then disappears. Would you say that we shouldn't bring about that world, or that we should?
Again, I think the intuitive answer is that we should bring about that world. I'm not sure of it. Although, again, like this is David Benatar's argument. It's clearly not my main argument, which is why I left it.
Yeah, I think Benatar's argument is obviously wrong.
Yeah, it's not I don't really endorse the argument, but I mean I see why you would agree with it, or if you could agree with
it. Okay. From Papaya Thief. For Omni, how are you not tortured over your lack of sprinkles on your cake? And this is one of yours. Has been like a super fan.
I don't know. You know, it's the struggles of existence.
What is the meaning behind this?
We were talking about the ice. The chocolate cake, right? And how he desires the cake.
Barely hear.
The
God, this is so bad.
On the cake, which makes suffering, right? I'm not saying it's like a huge amount of suffering, but it is suffering.
Suffering from your mic. Okay.
Yeah, worst ever.
It's so bad. Like,
I might switch back to the Apple mic.
Yeah, well, now that the debate's over.
Sounds like you in a hurricane, bro.
No, it's really bad. It's like, oh, it's really, wait till you hear it. All right, so from Brian Cope, if there isn't any reason for our creation and we all inevitably die, shouldn't we create our own reason to live generally through the betterment of mankind? If not, why?
Oh, fuck. I've been using the internal microphone this entire time.
You think, yeah, this is better, right?
Oh my god!
Holy shit. Oh god, I did the Dylan Blay.
Oh my god, this was worse than Dylan Blay because his mic didn't even sound like shit like
oh
that.
my
Like,
fucking
this
god.
is the worst.
Let's redo all of it. Fuck me.
Worst fucking mic on this show by far.
Okay, I concede. Omni wins.
Yeah, I said Omni should win just like
3 in a row.
2 concessions.
So everybody vote for Omni. I'm sure he would win anyway, but
oh my
It's
god,
3
so
Omni. Don't forget about the one before
he's
that.
gonna get all cocky.
Wait, what was
God
Omni
damn
is
it.
rising, bro. You cannot stop Omni. It's inevitable.
I'm putting up the poll right now, anyways, for people.
Oh yeah. Wait. Oh yeah, the tree one. And I also won the spread. Yeah. No, I'm an undefeated left-wing debater.
okay. There we go.
Well, the poll is up. All right, so let's see what other. Oh my god! Of course that happens right at the end. He figures it out.
Oh, nice name, Brian Cope.
Oh, did we already answer this?
I don't think so.
Okay, so answer it.
There isn't any reason for our creation. We all inevitably die. Shouldn't we create our own reason to live generally through the betterment of mankind? If not, why? Yeah, I think existentialism is also like a cope. We're creating our own reason. Yeah, that's because biology told us to do that, to find some excuse to stay alive. Yeah, it's all a mad cope. Life isn't worth living. Abandon hope.
Well, I don't think that we have no. I'm a moral realist, so I think that we do have reasons to care about certain things.
Okay. Let's see here from Jazz. Do you think this argument only works in a utilitarian framework? Could we not track meaning or even subjective value more than pleasure, pain?
Oh, well, you could make the anti-natalist argument for, like, on non-utilitarian bases.
I think if it's subjective, then yeah, I guess if you subjectively agree that life intrinsically has meaning or something like that, which a lot of people do, then I have no response to you. If you axiomatically value life, I guess you've defeated me. But I mean, I can argue from like deontology, like even though I'm not a deontologist, which is actually the first part of my argument, which was that that basically reproduction is a violation of human right consent, right? So I could make a few arguments based on where you're coming from, but there's certain people that I wouldn't ever be able to convince, and that's okay.
Okay, from Colombia. Why does a nihilist support the death of all life on Earth, yet is hesitant? Wait, what did I say? Why? Okay, yeah. Why does a nihilist support the death of all life on Earth, yet is hesitant on the subject of murder? Wouldn't that just be a step towards what he wants?
Okay, because murder not only actually decreases the quality of life for most people who are in the vicinity of the murder, and that balances things out a lot. I don't think it would work. Like, yeah, sure, in a vacuum, I guess people dying is a good thing. But like, if we had a society where everybody was murdering each other, nobody would be around. Like, nobody would be standing still for long enough to think about whether or not we should continue living. So in that sense, if we have such a disruptive society that an anti-natalist movement cannot come about at all, then yeah, murder doesn't seem to be a good idea generally.
Okay,
I'm with you that murder is not a good idea generally.
Let me see if these ones are. I'm hoping people didn't like repeat their questions, but okay. From Devin, would Omni debate discuss pseudoscience and the origins of modern religion?
I don't really know. Like, I mean, I think pseudoscience is bad.
Okay.
Like, and I think modern religion is false. I don't know what would be debated, like whether pseudoscience is good.
Let's see here. From Jazz, please tell our friend here that absolutely nobody in philosophy takes nihilism seriously. Have you ever actually read any philosophy?
Wait, what was
What?
the
Said from Jazz, please tell our friend here that absolutely nobody in philosophy takes nihilism seriously. Have you ever actually read any philosophy?
I don't know what you're talking about. Nihilism is objectively correct.
I mean, I'd be happy to debate you on that, right? I'm not a nihilist, but I also think that the
Well,
claim.
I am a nihilist.
Well, but I also
Identity thiefed.
no,
You're Omni.
I said I'm not a nihilist.
Well,
Wait,
super chat. Don't know how you do it. Salute.
Yeah, though I think that
I'm just gonna put the. Sorry, I'm gonna put the link in chat. People want to come on, they can come on.
Yeah, and cocaine and hookers is the answer.
What?
Also, wait,
to the super chat.
Particularly if Tyler wants to
Cocaine and hookers.
stop.
I don't think Tyler. I haven't seen Tyler in chat for a while, so I don't think he's still here. Let me see. I think I missed something. Hold on.
Wait, just one point to make is I think what Jazz said was false. Nihilism is a position that's taken seriously in philosophy. Like a lot of philosophers are moral anti-realists, at least.
Okay.
Now, I'm a moral realist, but it's like it is a position that is defended by like a lot, like 27% of philosophers.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm so bummed about your mic.
So am I.
That is
this mic is really good.
F's in chat for nihilist. Wow, what a fucking mess that was. All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. So if you guys want to give closing statements and final thoughts.
I have a final thought. If anybody's mic ever like sounds like shit like mine, you should always like tell them that like to check whether or not their mic is actually plugged in and whether or not like they're not using the computer mic, because
I told you your mic sounded bad. I didn't know what it was.
But just I don't know, maybe like next time you could just add that as a suggestion, because I am too stupid to think of it on time.
Well, Jazz is here. Let's
hold on. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you might have some questions on this.
Okay, so Jesus Christ. Okay, there's so many things. I'm like drunk as fuck right now, so I just want to come on and say hello to everybody. You're both arguing so well. I love you both. Like, wow, kiss kiss. You're doing great.
Oh wow, I actually have a fan and not a bunch of anti-fans like usual.
Yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't more. I think your views are much different in nihilists than like the David Benatar views. Usually when I hear like anti-natalism, I'm used to those that matrices, and you didn't do that, which is very interesting, because that was one of my problems. It was like, hey, David Benatar, like, why can't we just suicide everyone on the planet? And you would push the fact that you'd push that red button to me is like, I don't agree with you, but it's pretty fucking cool. I'm glad you'll go that far with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the murder and like the push the red button, I think it's like it's a bunch of like emotional, like it's basically we're just reverting to deontology. Oh yeah, murder is by definition wrong. You know, like some act is wrong. But then like if you wanted to revert back to deontology where murder is just automatically wrong, then you could always agree with me that having children is a violation of consent. You know, like I don't think
in the way that like children will die eventually. Therefore, if you give birth to somebody, they're going to die. Is that kind of your take?
No, I think like just the fact that you're forcing someone into life is a violation of consent, isn't it? Like there's a reason all the babies come out of the womb crying.
Well,
That's
wait,
an emotional
but
take, but do
Oh yeah,
you see the
okay.
difference between involuntary and non-voluntary?
I think I'm just looking at I'm just looking at consent and like
well,
life
yeah,
is
but
So
coercive
consent, really
and
quickly. So consent is what we have to talk about is whether something either A can consent or not consent, so that be involuntary. Like for example, you rape somebody, that's involuntary sex, right? But non-voluntary is something that can't consent either, can't consent or not consent. For example, like say you throw a rock at a building, like did the rock consent? No, it's non-voluntary consent. Those are two different things. When you talk about something like a fetus or an infant, at a certain point, it is the potential for voluntary consent or involuntary consent, but when you're giving birth to it, it's non-voluntary consent. No.
No. I mean, I think most fetuses aren't very pleased at the fact that they're being pushed out of the womb. But like
What does that
I don't
mean?
think.
Like like the babies don't
But
have like
okay,
an
so
idea one way or
can I
the
give you
other.
an example? Like when somebody's asleep, can you
my
fuck them
friend
if you know that they
Jim was
won't? If
upset getting pushed out of the womb.
yeah, so if someone is asleep, can you have sex with them if you can guarantee they won't wake up? Because that's
Well, no, of course not,
non-voluntary.
because you would assume that if the person found out about it, that you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, so the involuntary part of it is because it's like it's not like they can't consent. It's the can't the consent is the I'm saying like the consent is
Cutting out
decided
really
in the
bad, Jazz.
yeah, you are. Yeah, the consent is decided in the future, right? When the person wakes up, they still have consent. So so the future person can decide consent or non-consent for even asleep the same person while they're asleep. And I think the same thing goes with babies. I don't think that like even if it was the case that like babies or like embryos couldn't consent now that like that their consent just shouldn't be considered because in the future there will be a person who is able to consent and that person will have been created against their without their consent. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, wait, but that's obviously not going to be the criterion that a deontologist is going to be used. The relevant thing is not actual consent. So, for example, if we see someone who is who is like unconscious and who got shot and is like unconscious, they didn't consent to being rushed to the hospital, but they wouldn't say that it's wrong to rush them to the hospital.
Well, I think there's implied consent. I think the fact that they haven't killed themselves or like
no, they just got knocked
implies
out. They didn't imply any consent. They just like were sitting there chilling, and then a guy hit them over the head and shot them.
Yeah, so it's implied that the person, because they weren't in the act of trying to kill themselves, I think it's implied that they still have a desire to be alive. So I think it's you can take it on pretty good evidence that they would like to continue living.
Okay, but liking to continue living is not the same thing as it's not the same thing as it being the case that.
But you're kind of saying that
So I'm saying that like this consent is separated through time, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And the same thing with fetuses. The consent is separated through time because only the future person can consent, but you are violating that future person's consent by giving birth to them or having them now. But if you abort them, then there is no future person, so there is no consent to be violated.
I mean, neither of us are deontologists, but I think that's not going to work, right? Because the question is not what they will in fact consent to. The question is or what they have in fact consented to. The question is what they would consent to, or what they could rationally consent to, or something like that. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to Parfit's argument that like the best version of deontology converges with consequentialism and says that the relevant question is what everyone could rationally consent to. And that's going to be what makes things go best.
So
But-
usually if I'm thinking about something from a deontologist like point of view, I usually think of things that violate consent in terms of whether something's substantial, whether it's reversible, and whether it's urgent. So you can run through and you would probably have to fulfill two of these criteria in order to violate someone's consent. For example, if something was urgent but it was not substantial and it was not reversible, you should probably wait for later. If something's substantial but it's not reversible and it's not urgent, you can also you can wait for later. If something's reversible but it's not substantial and it's not urgent, like there's no reason to do it now. But if you have two of them, if it's substantial and urgent, then you can't wait for them to give consent. You just have to do it, right? So of those three, substantial, urgent, and reversible, I think if you fulfill two of these, then you're allowed to violate someone's consent and go ahead to do it with them. When it comes to birth, I don't think any of the three criteria are met. You can argue about whether or not it's substantial, whether it's a good thing or not, but you cannot argue that it's urgent because it objectively is not urgent, and you can't really argue that it's reversible because objectively it's not reversible. So from that criteria, at least, I would say.
I don't think that's a criterion that most deontologists would use, but neither of us are deontologists, so it's silly to argue about.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I guess you guys were doing your closing statements. So if you want to finish that.
Do you want to go first or should I?
I guess I can go first. I think, again, I don't expect to like win the debate as in like convince everybody that I'm right. Like, I don't think it's possible really to convince most people that their life is not worth living, despite me thinking that's objectively the case. I think I just want to open the door to possibilities for you to consider that things that are non-intuitive or against nature in some way can nevertheless be correct. So, and I think you should really consider, if you're a deontologist, whether or not having children is okay by the laws of consent. If you're a utilitarian, whether or not the fact that you can endlessly suffer but you cannot endlessly feel pleasure, and that all pleasure is both preceded by and followed by, and in many cases coincides with some amount of suffering. I think the math kind of makes it clear that you should consider at least that that life has a negative value. Everything else, just be aware of emotional arguments. They're probably what is used to trap me all the time, and they work too. But I think that's all I have.
Well, okay, so I don't think that I've just made emotional arguments. I mean, I think that, like, throughout this debate, I've presented aggregate trends that indicate the quality of life of people is improving. I've indicated that most people enjoy most moments of their conscious existence. I've indicated that like most people who do research into this conclude that most people have positive quality of life. So I think that, none of the evidence that we get is going to be great, but I think that that's certainly much better evidence than pointing to random bad things in people's life and arguing they make life not worth living, when I can point to good things that do make life worth living. The existence of certain elements of, like, the existence of chronic pain doesn't make life not worth living. It's conceivable that life could be not worth living, that there could be chronic pain for some people and life could be worth living. And I think that, there's the possibility of the transhumanist utopia where we could experience billions of years of well-being. So I think that, I think that's going to it's just going to turn out that it's a good thing to bring new people into existence.
I'm and I approve this message.